Hi everyone, I'm Shaheen from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with AnaMaria Banta, a seasoned marketer and currently Senior Marketing Manager for EMEA at Fluke Reliability. Thanks so much for joining us, AnaMaria.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to speak to you today.
Yeah, me too. So first of all, tell us where you're joining from and just introduce yourself in your own words.
I am joining from Munich, Germany. I've been doing marketing for a bit over 10 years now, and I started as a clinical psychologist and ended up here. So I'm happy to share my story with you.
I see. So, I mean, you probably know in the Content Mix, our audience are both content marketers and content creators. I mean, what's the kind of, do you think there's overlap, I guess, between the communities and what kinds of...
Yes, this was actually one of the first things that I noticed when we first connected. We do focus on marketing in general, digital marketing, content marketing, and I do believe that content is king. So you can't do marketing without content. Actually, I think you can't do anything without content these days. So I think this is something that is very present for people because it is the way in which you make your voice heard, basically.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, let's go to, can you tell us a bit about how you got into marketing in the first place and in your background?
As I mentioned at the beginning, I actually used to be a clinical psychologist. And a project that I did in India was on HR, but I had the chance of taking a project in marketing, and I felt that marketing is a lot more engaging than HR was. It gave you a platform to be creative. And as I was mentioning to you at one point when we were discussing, there was this blog that I read in 2008 by Seth Godin, where he was talking about the idea of having personalized marketing. And he refers to it as permission marketing long before GDPR ever meant anything for anyone. And I thought that was a really good way of communicating with people. And for a storyteller, I think that marketing is the best way to work and to create. So I ended up doing it, loving it as
So,
well.
I mean, what does that mean exactly, permission marketing?
So the way he explains it, and I think that's just great, is that you need to look at marketing as a permission that your audience gives you in order to steal their attention and their time. And he presents this as being something that's extremely impactful because attention is the only thing as time that you cannot take back if you changed your mind. So he's talking about the idea of building personalized and anticipated relevant content for people to read and to fall in love with you. He's making this association of how marketing and selling is basically like dating. So I really enjoyed the idea and the concept behind it. So I thought it speaks very much to the way I see marketing.
Yeah, and can you tell us like what industries you've worked in? I know currently you're working in like B2B services kind of industry, but what's your previous experience?
So I've been, I think it's fair to say, all my career in B2B, and I want to think that B2B is looked at in the best way as business to people. I remember I was in a Google training when I was working for Henkel, and they were talking about the fact that B2B companies a lot of times forget that at the end of the day, there's a person making a decision and it's not the business as a whole. And you still need to address the individual. So I've worked in automotive, I've worked in software, in consumer goods and services, and I think that I've interacted enough with different industries to understand that while they all have their specific way of approaching individuals, it's still basically the same. You need to make your story appealing, and not just appealing, but relatable to the individual that you're selling to.
Absolutely. And how has your background in psychology helped you in your marketing career?
I think it has a lot, and it's something that I look at every day. It's the way in which I think of the timing at which I send out the emails, how the emails should be phrased, how the events should speak to what we're trying to create. It's basically just understanding basic things like, does your customer behavior come to terms with the way you're trying to approach? I was actually thinking about this week because I got approached by an agency that does forensic marketing, and I was really interested to see their product because I'm in a period when I'm scouting for new ways to increase funnel and to basically make our company visible. And I was extremely curious with the product, yet the way in which they approached me was so aggressive, and I think it's fair to say irritating, that I canceled the meeting with them. I think this is something that marketers should keep very present. Yes, there is a lot of competition. Yes, there is a background noise that you need to pass in order to get to your audience. But the way you do it has to be in this permissive way. You're asking for permission for your voice to be heard. And I think psychology has helped me a lot in the way I shape the voice that I'm trying to put out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I guess I'm curious because I think in B2B, your target is probably very specific usually. Like you have a very specific person within the company that you're trying to target. I mean, how do you think, does that make marketing like easier or harder than in B2C?
I don't know if it's necessarily easier or harder. It's definitely more specific because you would definitely not want to put out CIO content for a junior manager. You do need to make sure that everything you put out is relatable, so that it's like, just imagine you receive an email for, I don't know, I don't have anything as an example right now, but for a product that you for sure definitely are not the target, you're not going to read the email. You're not, at best, you might click to open it, but the engagement will not be there. So it's definitely trying to make sure you are staying relevant to what your audience is looking for and wants to read. And I think that's something that has been a lot more defined in the last years, because I think a lot of the content that was pushed out, let's say 10 years ago, might have been more technical. So if you wanted to reach a maintenance manager, you would have probably put out content that is related to the features of your product. But if you want to speak to the business as a whole, you need to address the value that you as a company or as a vendor can provide to the business as a whole. And I think this leads to the content colors changing considerably, because you would create more thought leadership content. You want to position yourself as a company of experts that can support your customer in different stages, not just selling one product in particular, but offering solutions after the product is sold as well. So I think that has changed quite a lot in the last 10 years.
Yeah, definitely. And I wanted to ask you that, so you just started your new role at Fluke, I think when earlier this year, right? In the middle of the pandemic. So what was that like, starting a new role in this strange time?
It has been quite the challenge. We signed a contract before the situation escalated to this point. So I have to admit I was lucky in that regard, because this is a company that I see myself evolving and growing. And so definitely the fact that the pandemic hadn't started gave me a good environment. I do want to say that I wish I could have met the team from US before the role has started, which I did manage to meet my direct boss, but everyone else was a challenge to meet. We are quite present with video, I think, and that compensates, but it's not the same. We don't get to have a face-to-face coffee, and that's something that you do miss. And of course, the tools in order to get immersed in the systems are quite different. But it has been, I think, a positive experience altogether, and I do feel very integrated. And I think because of the pace in which we've communicated and engaged, I don't even feel that we haven't met face to face. So yes, it has been a journey.
And I imagine like the nature of your role has been impacted as well because of the limitations of like the kinds of marketing we can do right now, especially with the events. I'm curious, how are you adapting to the not being able to do the in-person events?
I have to admit that I started stepping away a bit from the idea of doing events in my job, I would say in the last year and a half, because we did see some measurements. And at one point we were discussing about a year and a half ago that we are putting 35% of our budget in events, and we are getting only 25% return. And with digital, we were putting out a lot less, and the output was a lot higher. So we did look and somehow realize that the way we get to our audience is changing. It's fair to say that all B2B companies have moved to webinars as a high source of visibility with the audience. And I think it's also fair to say that there is a bit of saturation of that, because I think anyone would get an average of 3-4 webinars invites a week. And at one point, it becomes a bit more difficult to say why your webinar would deliver higher impact. It's the same with LinkedIn, right? You were saying at one point that LinkedIn had a higher, your post on LinkedIn had a higher impact 2-3 years ago because less people were present on LinkedIn, or not even present, but posting and engaging. And now you make a post and the audience is, the competition is stiff.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about this before we started recording, and I was saying that there's this sweet spot in LinkedIn history where there was a number of people on LinkedIn, but they had just launched the new newsfeed thing, and people hadn't really figured it out yet, and there weren't very many people posting at all, and the few people who were posting got a huge reach. And now it's that's not so much the case anymore.
The competition has changed for sure. So then there's this, I think this engagement, and this is one of the things that I really love about marketing. Like, you always have to adapt. You always have to find new solutions of how the method you get your story told. But I think what doesn't have to change is the core of the story. The way you present the company, the authenticity of your message should stay the same. It's the method in which you make the story delivered. I think that's the part that is constantly changing and that you need to adapt to. So I think it's definitely a profession that doesn't give you space to get bored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's definitely true. So speaking of social media, I was going to ask you, what's your favorite social media platform? I can guess, I suppose, based on your last answer. Yeah.
I definitely am a big fan of LinkedIn. I am very excited with the opportunities LinkedIn has to offer. I got my last 3 jobs all on LinkedIn. I didn't even bother with any other platform. I think it's it's a platform where you don't necessarily have a lot of access to presenting yourself in an intimate way, but you do have space to present yourself as an capable individual. And I think it's the options that you have in presenting things that you're passionate about, things that you want to have an impact on. I think it's a good way of making your voice heard. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting the point you made about it being like less intimate, because I think like the conversations you see on LinkedIn are really different compared to other platforms where they're so cordial and polite. and and someone posts like a very non-controversial opinion, and then all these people say like, I completely agree. I don't know if you've noticed that, but because I think people want to engage in LinkedIn, but they feel like they have to do it like in a positive way, right?
Which I think is important. I think the fact that there are other platforms where people are just lashing and putting out frustrations instead of thinking about the positive aspects of reaching this amount of people. I think as long as LinkedIn manages or continues to keep the format in this way, I think it's a good environment for professionals to grow. And I do believe it's important, again, to be authentic in your narrative and to be constant. But I think that when you do manage to have a clearly defined goal and a clearly defined way in which you put out the information, you can't be but successful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to go to the recommendations part of the interview. So to ask you for a few of your personal recommendations. So first of all, like, what's your favorite marketing book or author?
I think it's safe to say that it's Seth Godin. As I mentioned, he is a part of the way in which I shaped my perception of marketing. And I think he's very forward thinking for his time. Everything that you see, as I mentioned, even GDPR is a thing in the last 2 years since it became enforced, but he was talking about this 12 14 years ago. So I think he's definitely an expert from and a source of continuous inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
yes, he's definitely my number one.
Okay, so yeah, that's a great tip. So could you, just to end the interview, give us your final takeaways or some parting advice for other marketers in Europe?
So I think it's very important to have a very clear strategy and direction. These are essential for any marketer in order to make sure the way you create the customer journey is relevant for them. I think it's important to always have present on the top of your mind what are the questions and the needs the customers have at each stage of this journey, and to make sure that you provide informations that are useful for them in solving these problems. I think this is the way in which you keep the customer engaged and close and connected to the storyline that you are presenting.
Absolutely, that's a great point to end on. So thank you so much, AnaMaria, for your man. I'm gonna say that. Okay, so that's a great point to end on. Thank you so much, AnaMaria, for sharing your insights with us and being on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really hope that we're going to continue collaborating.
Yeah, me too, definitely. And I just want to say thank you to everybody for listening in. And for more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out thecontentmix.com and keep tuning into the podcast for daily interviews with content experts. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.